Welcome to Ecclesia Principles, a biblical strategy for believers to engage in God's design for government with Ray Eppard.
Hello, glad you could join us again today. We're going to continue talking about the balance between self-government and centralization. Because as I've stated, there's a lot of things that we're dealing with in our culture today that really has to do with that balance being out of whack. And we're going to look at some things this week historically so that you can see where those changes went and what happened. And with this, the problem with all of it comes back to man being in a fallen condition. The fact that we have a sin nature in this flesh. And in Romans 7:23 it says, "But I see another law in my members, warring against the law of my mind, and bringing me into captivity to the law of sin in my members." And so at that point, that sin nature raises its head and begins to get things out of whack, particularly when power comes into play. Now, here's a reality that we just got to understand. It is a reality. If you would, the book of Ecclesiastes, the way that you need to read the book of Ecclesiastes is that God gave Solomon wisdom. And with that, if you would, he didn't have the solution, but he came to know that just life here was, as he put it, vanity and vexation of spirit. And that ultimately, the way we would put it in the New Testament framework, is you needed to be born again. And without that, everything else meant nothing, because ultimately you die. And there had to be more than this. And so with that vanity and vexation of spirit, and he talks about in Ecclesiastes, the dynamics within a culture of what happens. And here's the thing. Power attracts money. Power attracts money. Money attracts power. Those two very frequently go hand in hand. Whether it's good or bad, it is the reality. It's just like if I took this phone and I let it go, it's going to drop. That is the dynamics. Power attracts money. Money attracts power. Those two are tied together almost inseparably. Now, here's the thing, and this again is why there has to be balance. When centralization takes place, that's usually done for production and efficiency, which in that case, when you increase the production and you increase efficiency, then profit margins increase. And that's why the assembly line was created, was to be able to do a better job, more economical. And with that, those that are able to do that, much as we talked about last week, the box stores versus the mom and pops, when they're able to drive the economics, then it kind of dries up the other side. Now, with this, where I want to go today is corporations and unions. Corporations and unions. Because historically, where we're at today is not where we've always been. America started off very much as a pure capitalist country. Now, the thing of it is, pure capitalism, and don't think I'm a heretic. I'm not a socialist. I'm not a communist. I'm opposed to those things. But pure capitalism does have some problems. There has to be boundaries. One of the concepts that we've talked about in time with this is that everything has to have limits. Everything has to have limits. When the Industrial Revolution came, then, especially then, the flaws of pure capitalism began to emerge. Because before, America was so much of an agricultural society. There were, there were cities and there were dynamics that were going on there, but again, they were kind of secluded to that area, to that town, to that city. But the Industrial Revolution put things on steroids to a degree. And centralization was able to grow to a degree it had never been able to grow in the past. And with that, again, the assembly line, being able to get the goods necessary to make products, move them along, the rail system that had connected both sides of the country. Everything was put into place and was ready for that Industrial Revolution. Now, what happened is that the owners of a lot of the corporations, basically, they had the jobs, and the people worked for little of nothing. And if you would, because of the sin nature, they took advantage because they were the ones that had the jobs. And you didn't want to lose that. And so there was such leverage that because of the abuses, how long they would have to work, how little they would make while they were working that long, those dynamics gave rise to unions. It gave rise to unions because in this situation of, quote, pure capitalism, it got out of balance. The centralization had such power that, as one person said, hey, just stack them up like cordwood, run them through, wear them out, and hire another one. And that's largely the way things were going. There was no recognition, no honor to self-government. What about the people's lives? Well, no, we just got to create the production, and that's all they're for. And with that, now what has happened, the unions came into existence and were very much fought at that time. Now it's almost like we have a balance the other way. Centralization, both sides have centralization now, but now many of the unions are almost too powerful. They have centralized so much that now the individuals within those unions or within that industry have very little say. Their self-government is gone. If they don't want to be a part of it there, it's mandatory for them in certain places, in certain states and so forth. And the businesses, to a degree, are almost held hostage to them at that point. And so it's like things have shifted. The bottom line is there needs to be a balance. But see, it doesn't matter, excuse me, which side this is on. The sin nature is what drives the excesses. Where, again, before, it was the corporations, working people, 12-hour days, giving them little to nothing under horrible conditions. And so that gave birth to the unions to counterbalance that centralization. Well, now, in many cases, as I just said, the unions are on the side of centralization, and the people that don't agree with everything that the union is doing, then they're down here and they have little to no voice. And very often that includes the companies that the unions are in. They not in every case, but so much of it. The dynamics in our culture today are creating this imbalance, and it has to be brought into a balance. Again, excuse me, the only counterbalance to centralization is self-government, empowering the individual. There are unions that I'm aware of that if you are going to work in this particular profession, and that is unionized, then there are places that you have no option. You have to be a part of it, and you've got to pay, in some cases, up to 10 to 14% of your income as dues. Well, that's a hefty fee. And in these dynamics, again, the individual is being suppressed. Self-government is the counterbalance. We have to balance self-government and centralization. Again, centralization is essential for development and progress, but for a healthy environment, for a healthy society, self-government is there. With our nation right now, even politically, if you would, it's almost like the politicians are a union of their own. It seems like it's almost impossible to get rid of some of them. It doesn't matter what they do, they just keep getting elected. And those dynamics that are there, very often, they are offsetting the individual rights, the self-government of the people, and it's usually not even what the people want. Now, again, we're not a democracy. We are a democratic republic. And so it's not just what does the majority want, but very frequently the representatives are going completely contrary to what the majority want. And there's stats that they give and say, oh, well, the people want them. More people are inclined to it now. Well, in very often in those situations, it's because it's being rammed down their throat, and they've kind of just, well, this is coming, might as well get used to it and be happy. And that dynamic is in place. And again, it's because self-government is not being allowed to counterbalance it. Now, what do we do? And this is what we're going to start talking about this week. What do we do in these situations? We have to begin to prioritize self-government. We have to begin to prioritize the rights of the individual as opposed to the centralization. Because right now, centralization is dominating. It is dominating. And we have to push self-government. We have to push individual, we have to push individual rights. We have to stand for that. At that point, very often, the case can be made, well, this works really well. Yeah, it does. It's very efficient. Centralization is very efficient. But the problem is, with that efficiency and the sin nature, power gets placed there and abuses begin to take place, just like they did in the Industrial Revolution. We are at the place right now, very similar to where we were with the Industrial Revolution. This is a technology revolution, an informational revolution, that if we're not careful, if we do not promote self-government and individual rights, we're going to be back at a place where everything that is centralized is going to oppress the individual, take advantage of the individual, and create problems that it's going to take a lot of difficulty to offset. We have to promote self-government and individual rights. It is the counterbalance to centralization. See you tomorrow.